many other children really envied. By the age of 9, John was already driving a tractor. By the age of 11, he was ploughing his own fields. These were not occasional treats arranged for a photograph. They were genuine responsibilities given to a boy growing up on a working farm where everybody was expected to contribute. Next. Well done. John was the eldest boy in a family of 2 brothers and 1 sister, and being the eldest came with expectations. There were calves to feed, machinery to help with, and jobs that always seemed to be waiting to be done. As a boy, he sometimes felt a little bit hard done by because his father could inevitably find something else for him to do. Only later did he realise that many of his school friends actually envied this life, the space, the animals, the machinery, and the sense of freedom that came with growing up on a farm. What may have seemed like chores at the time were also teaching him independence, confidence, and practical ability. Long before he entered business, John had already learned that people depend on him and that the job needed to be finished properly. Next. Discipline was an important part of family life. John's parents expected their children to work, behave properly, and accept responsibility. Looking back, John believes those firm expectations gave him the work ethic that remained with him throughout his life. 4 qualities stand out: those of responsibility, practical ability, reliability, and family duty. He became someone who could turn his hand to machinery, solve problems, and keep going when circumstances changed. Those qualities later helped him build a huge haulage business, run a coach company, and manage vehicles over many decades. They also explain something about John that we know through Rotary, being dependable, straightforward, and always willing to help. The foundations were laid very early in the fields and the farm buildings of Folly Farm. Next one. That should be slide 5. It is. Excellent. When John left school, he expected to remain on the farm. An older farm worker was retiring, and his father needed him to stay at home, and that seemed to be the obvious course. But once all 3 brothers were working there, their father decided to divide responsibilities. One brother took on concentrating on the cattle, another on tractor work, and John was told that he needed to find employment elsewhere. Now, that could have easily felt like rejection, but John responded in the way that became characteristic of him. He acted, and he secured work driving a lorry almost immediately. That decision, made for him by his family's circumstances, opened the door to the transport industry that changed the entire course of his working life. And that's the point that Ken was making. I thought John, born on a farm, lived on a farm all his life, was a farmer. And until I sat down last week, I didn't know all of this. So, slide 6. Thank you. At 21, with support from his father, John bought his very first lorry. Now, that may not be the first lorry, but it was a lorry. Right, okay. And then John established his own haulage business in 1961. And if my maths is right, you were only 21 at that point, yeah? Amazing. That was a considerable responsibility for somebody so young. And the business grew to several vehicles, and then his younger brother joined him in the business. Much of the early work involved hauling coal from collieries in Leicestershire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, and South Wales. And that demanded long hours, mechanical knowledge, and the ability to manage both customers and vehicles. John was not merely a driver, he was building and operating a business, aged 21. The same boy who'd been trusted to plough alone at 11 was now making commercial decisions, maintaining equipment, and ensuring that loads arrived where they were meant to be on time. Next slide. Thank you. Transport businesses survive by adapting, and John was no exception. As miners' strikes and wider changes affected the coal industry, the company diversified. One important source of work became transporting bulk cattle feed from Sharpness docks. John was also recruited as a transport manager for the same company at Sharpness. The role lasted about 2 years before the company closed, at which point he returned to running the family haulage business. Sharpness also produced one of the more unusual stories of his career. Apparently, dock workers temporarily banned him from, after confusing him with somebody who had an unpaid debt. It turned out it wasn't John, as you would imagine, and once the misunderstanding was resolved, they apologised. It's a good example of the unpredictable situations John encountered and his ability to take them in his stride. Next slide. Around 1976, John made another major change. He moved from freight haulage into passenger transport by purchasing a small business in Hawkesbury Upton. The company began with around 5 coaches, with school transport forming the major part of the work, and under John's ownership it grew to as many as 14 vehicles. Transporting people brought a different level of responsibility. A load of coal doesn't mind whether the journey is comfortable, but passengers certainly do. So reliability, safety, presentation and punctuality all mattered. John had to manage drivers, vehicles, contracts and customers while still understanding the mechanical side of the fleet. And what began as a small operation became a central business for the next 43 years of his life. Next slide, thank you. Ooh. John spent around 20 years operating from Hawkesbury Upton before relocating the business to Cromwell for another 23 years. The work included school contracts, private hires, long-distance trips abroad, involving many early starts and very little sleep. John continued coach driving until he was approaching 80 years of age, an extraordinary working life by any measure. The business finally ceased operating in 2019, just as the COVID-19 pandemic devastated the coach and tourism industries. Selling the remaining vehicles was understandably difficult as the market had collapsed, but they were eventually sold. After decades of keeping people moving, John and Laura settled in Hawkesbury in a house they had bought many years earlier from the very family who'd sold them the coach business. I hope all of this is right. I wrote it all down. Oh, so far so good. Good. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. John repeatedly credits Laura as one of the main reasons the business and family life worked. The coach company demanded long hours, early mornings, telephone calls, administration, and constant organisation. Laura supported the company while also working as a school secretary for 36 years. Did I get that right? 36 years? So you were running 2 businesses, really, weren't you? Their partnership meant that one could cover what the other could not, and the business could continue through demanding periods. It is easy to describe a company through vehicles, contracts and turnover, but behind it was a husband and wife team that managed daily pressures together. John's account makes it clear that it was never simply his success. It was something they built and sustained as a partnership, alongside raising their family and meeting the responsibilities of ordinary life. I timed this to try and make it 15 minutes, and I'm pretty close. Okay. Family remains central. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. Family remains central throughout John and Laura's working lives. They had 2 daughters and later 2 grandchildren, Daisy and Max. Daisy went on to become a veterinary surgeon, which feels particularly appropriate for a family with such deep farming roots. Max now lives and works in South Wales, a region John knew well from his haulage years. Their eldest daughter, Carolyn, lived with multiple sclerosis and sadly passed away in 2019. Having also experienced the loss of a child, I understand something of the enduring pain John and Laura carry, because grief may change with time, but love and pride remain forever. Any account of John's life must acknowledge both the pride and the loss held within that family story. The interview showed that business achievements matter to him, but actually relationships and and family memories matter much more. His life has not been defined by what he built, but by the people with whom he shared it. Next slide, please. Okay. John and Laura have owned a Rolls-Royce for around 27 years. They bought it shortly before Carolyn's wedding, and it was later used for other weddings as well. It has been retained not simply because it's a fine motor car, but because of its connection with Carolyn and the memories of the period of the family life. For someone who spent so many years around lorries and coaches vehicles naturally feature strongly in John's story. But this particular car represents something different. It reminds us that machinery can carry emotional meaning, a wedding day, a family gathering, a photograph, and a journey remembered. The Rolls-Royce is less a possession, more of a treasure linked to their daughter and happy family occasions. And it appears every year at the car rally too, which is brilliant. Slide 13. Yeah, great, thanks. John joined Rotary around 29 years ago after encouragement from Arthur Marrow and John Appleby. He values Rotary because it introduced him to people that he might not otherwise have met. Farming and transport can keep a person within a particular working world. Rotary opens a broader circle of friendship and experiences. John especially remembers annual conferences and social occasions where members from different clubs formed life-lasting relationships. He also feels that Rotary has become a little bit more commercially organised and increasingly focused over time on fundraising, and that in the early years he remembered stronger emphasis on fellowship and enjoying alongside charitable work. That does not diminish the importance of service, but it highlights what Rotary has meant personally to him, which is friendship, belonging, and the chance to share time with people from many different walks of life. Next one, number 14, we're almost there. Rotary is not John's only long-standing organisation. He's also been a Freemason since 1969 and is now the longest-serving member of that lodge. He values both organisations, although he describes Rotary as being the one that's a little bit more relaxed. Across both, we see the same themes, I should say: fellowship, commitment, continuity, and of course, service to others. John has belonged to these organisations for decades, not merely attending occasionally, but becoming part of their shared story. In a world where people often move quickly between jobs, places, and interests, there's something significant about that constancy. His membership reflects the loyalty seen elsewhere in his life, to family, to work, to customers, and to friends. John's community contribution has grown from being present, dependable, and involved over many, many years. Number 15. Thank you. When asked how he would like to be remembered, John did not mention the number of lorries or coaches he owned, the miles he travelled, or the businesses he built. He said he would like to be remembered as a trustworthy man. That answer brings the whole story together. John takes pride in treating people properly, and the thought of upsetting somebody would trouble him deeply. His one principal regret is that he never completed an apprenticeship in a commercial garage, although he found many opportunities to use those mechanical skills whilst maintaining his own vehicles. From driving a tractor at 9 through to driving coaches at aged 80 years. His life reflects hard work, adaptability, loyalty, and practical skills. But the clearest measure of his legacy is simpler. People knew they could rely on him. John, thank you for sharing your life and times with me.